Awesome. Sorry about that, guys. It's there was inevitable tech issues for the live. So now we'll kind of get started on the presentation itself. And unfortunately, we can't share the presentation and see my face at the same time. So like I alluded to before, if you do have any questions, pop them in the comments and we'll aim to answer them after the session's actually done. So Nathan, the team, wanted me to jump on here because we've seen a massive increase in the numbers of people that have taken up running in Port Melbourne in the last couple of months for obvious reasons. And with that, there obviously comes a massive spike in injuries related to the running. So we wanted to discuss some of the potential reasons behind these injuries and set up some strategies moving forward to keep people running and getting through the rest of this COVID period. And so the goals of today's session are to understand what can lead to running injuries, to understand what we can do when an injury occurs, and also to understand what we can do to reduce the chance of future injury. And to do that, a really important principle or concept to understand is the relationship between capacity versus load. And we'll be going through both of these in detail with the coming slides. So what is capacity? So capacity just refers to the ability of our body or our muscles or tendons, ligaments and bones to tolerate the loads that we place on them. And these loads can be our running, they can be our job, they can be anything physical. And now there are quite a few other factors, so we'll kind of discuss them a bit later on. And then there's load. So when we talk about load, we're talking about both physical and psychological stress that we place in our tissues from running. But with runners specifically, when we talk about loads, we want to think about the overall volume. So how much running you've been doing in a given week or a given month, and how quickly you've built up to that level of running. How often you're running, the type of running you're doing. So for example, hills versus flat surface. And we're pretty lucky in Port Melbourne that most of it is fairly flat. And then other factors like footwear or running technique can also play a role in these injuries. So in an ideal world, we typically want to see that our capacity and our load are equal, or that our capacity is a bit higher than our load. And you can kind of see this representation on the right-hand side of the screen, where the capacity kind of overweighs the load. And now when our loads exceed our capacity, so our ability to tolerate the loads, as you can see on the right-hand side, we have an increased chance of injury. And this is where the majority of running injuries come from. Unfortunately, it usually comes in the form of knee pain or shin pain or foot and ankle pain. And the problem that we typically see in running is that when runners are feeling good in their training, they typically sharply increase their training load. They increase their speed, their distance, or their frequency of running. So for example, if their normal running load is 10 kilometres 5 times a week, and then one day the weather is nice and they were feeling good, so they went for a 15k run instead, that's definitely something that can contribute to the load exceeding our capacity. But sometimes it isn't that our training load has dramatically changed, and it is actually our capacity that has decreased. So things that can affect our capacity are things like our running history, so how long we've been running for, our general health, our diet, our medications, and how well we sleep. Stress and mood can play a part in reducing our capacity. A big one is how strong we are, our previous injuries, the footwear that we're using, And sometimes it even comes down to our biomechanics or how we actually run, so our technique with our running. So after we get injured, our capacity to tolerate our normal loads decreases. Whereas if normally we're able to do 10 kilometres, our capacity now might only let us run up to 7 kilometres. And you can see it on that little graph on the right-hand side. And so the aim of physio isn't to just get you back to where you were running before, but it's actually there designed to exceed your previous capacity so that your body is actually more robust for your future training loads. And hopefully when it's more robust, it can handle changes in training load or random events that you come up against. So we can increase your capacity by addressing some of the factors that we saw from a few slides ago. For example, through improving general health, rehab exercises, sleep, improving strength levels, or changing the way that we run. But now we probably get to the more exciting part of the presentation, and we'll chat about the things that we can do after we've sustained an injury and how to manage it best. So the most effective thing that we can do is to manage our loads a bit more effectively. So this is where you'll get the most bang for your buck. It's usually the first point of call when you see a physio, and we'll usually try and keep you running for as long as we can, unless it's indicated otherwise. But managing your load, what it refers to is a couple of different things. So it refers to managing the overall volume of your running and building you back up to your running goals over time. So for example, if you normally run 50 kilometres a week, we might reduce your total running distance for a period of time and then gradually aim to build you back up to your normal running loads. And the old adage of 10% a week still applies, and sometimes we can even push it up to 30% a week increase in your training load, depending on how long you've ran for, previous injuries, etc. And finally, one of the last things we can do for managing your load is changing the structure of your running week. So typically most runners will do a 3-day kind of split with their running. And a lot of the time what we see in clinic is that those 3 days or however many days they're running, they're at high intensity. So if we continuously train at high intensity and only train at high intensity, we don't allow our body to have effective rest. So what we want to try and do sometimes is split those days up into a low intensity day, a medium intensity day, and a high intensity day. And also making sure that we have rest days in there. So the second thing that we want to do if we're managing an injury is our rehab exercises. And these are usually geared towards the contributing factors as to why you potentially got injured in the first place. So things like muscle weaknesses, so weaknesses in the quadriceps or the calf muscles, your ability to control movement, so in movements like a single leg squat, or movements like a deadlift or something like that, or even restrictions in the movement, for example, in your ankle. And this is really an individualized process. This is something that is different for everybody. Some people might need a bit more strengthening in their calf muscles. Some people might need a bit more strengthening in their quadricep muscles. So the third thing that we can do to help manage these injuries is strength training. And strength training gets a bad rap in the running world. There's lots of bad stigma attached to it for runners. And I guess one of the main reasons that people are hesitant for strength training is a time constraint. Running takes up a lot of time, and adding an extra style of training in there potentially cuts into that. And the other fear is always that it will make the runner slower. A lot of the research that we're seeing now that's coming out at the moment actually points to the other side. It can actually reduce the chance of injury by roughly 50%. And it can also improve your running performance once you are back up and running. Now, strength training, again, is misinterpreted a lot of the time. It can be 2 times a week at home without equipment, or it can be 5 times a week at the gym. The most important part is that there is some kind of resistance training in there. And the reason that we want to do strength training is for a myriad of reasons, but the main one is that it trains the muscles to absorb the load that we place on it during running. So instead of our joints, our ankles and our knees or our hips taking the load, it's a bit more distributed through the muscles. And the stronger they are, the more that they can absorb. So this next page is just a couple of strength and endurance goals that I like to see my runners achieve. And this is probably a good test for everyone to do at home. Obviously, once you're warmed up and ready for exercise, but it's 25 single leg calf raises. It's 20 single leg hamstring bridges off of a chair, and 25 single leg squats down to a chair. And on the other side of the page is the strength goals. And these are the ones that typically you see the fear in people kind of come out. We want people to be able to do, on a standing calf raise, their body weight plus 30 or 40% of their body weight on top for 6 to 8 reps. And then with the seated calf raise, it's even more. So it's their body weight plus 120% for the same amount of reps, for those 6 to 8 reps. And this is where most of the research is leading towards these kind of standards, especially for longer distance runners. Now, the final thing that we can use in managing injuries, which is usually the last resort because it's usually the hardest one to change or to complete, is running retraining. So changing the technique that you run with. And what this helps to do is to shift the load to different parts of the body. So for example, if we want to shift the load away from the knee because you have kneecap pain, for example, we normally want to shift that load to the calf. We can do that in a couple of different ways. We can do it by landing on a different part of our foot. We can do it by taking quicker, shorter steps. Or we can do it by decreasing or changing the length of our step. Now, I've put this warning sign up in the corner of the page because running retraining can be tricky to implement. And you probably don't want to continue at the same volume or at the same intensity or distance or times per week that you were doing prior when you change your training load. The problem that we see is that when people change their training load too quickly, their initial injury might improve, but there's a higher chance of injuring where you've placed this new load. So if we've placed it more load on the calf now, we want to make sure that we don't do it too quickly and give the body a chance to adapt over time. So that's why this is usually my last resort when working with a runner, because we want to be careful about where we're placing this load. Now that's probably the end of the presentation here. I've got a bit of a roadmap from where momentum performance training is on Bay Street at the new location, up to our clinic. If you have any questions from this presentation, or if you want a copy of the slides, you can do one of two things. You can either email me at the email address on the screen, so it's ccalabrese@symmetryphysio.com.au, or pop your questions in the comments in this video, and I'll do my best to get back to them tonight. And we've also got a bit of a deal going on for those that train with Momentum or that have seen this video. Just mention that you have, or that you do train with Momentum, and we'll have a bit of a discount for you guys. You can book in online at the website there, and at the moment we're on a bit of reduced hours because of COVID, but hopefully we can see you guys in clinic and keep you guys on the park, keep you guys running. Excellent. Thanks, guys.